This Day in Comedy will come out December 3rd, and that's the Ethnic Encyclopedia Laughter. So that covers African American, Latin, Asian, Native American, and Middle Eastern. It's the first comedy encyclopedia.
Wow.
I did not know that. When I went in and I just said, well, we'll call it an encyclopedia. And then I looked it up, and there's never been a comedy encyclopedia.
Welcome to Common Sense Mamita. I am Lydia Nicole. If you want to know anything about acting tips, showbiz insight, or life lessons, you have come to the right place. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get information in real time. Today, we have an extraordinary comedian slash author slash writer, amazing person, and I am just so excited to introduce him to you because he is a phenomenon. Please help me welcome Darryl Littleton Sr.
Yeah.
Hey Darryl, how are you?
Lydia? Good to see you. Long
Good.
time.
Going through your comedy career, was BET the first show you started writing for, or because you said you had written for a lot of the comics who were hosting
Right.
BET? Were you a staff writer at that time?
When I started writing freelance for DL, when he left, that's when I got the job writing there for CEDRIC. And to CEDRIC's credit, because it doesn't really matter right now, CEDRIC had another writer. And me and CEDRIC had worked on the road together, so we were friends. We were cool. Comedy friends. Always got to distinguish, life friends and your work friends and your colleagues and all that. So we were good comedy friends. We had toured together. And he said, well, D, I'll be honest with you, I really don't need a writer because I got my guy who write for me, but I'm not going to tell them that. I'll let you still keep the job, and then you do your thing, and then we'll tell them, yeah, he wrote it, and it doesn't really matter. And so that's what was cool about him. Then when CEDRIC left, SOMMORE came in, and me and SOMMORE weren't really that familiar. I'd worked with her before. We did a competition together, but we didn't have that kind of camaraderie, so I could come and say, let me just get my money, and you do your own thing. Don't worry about me. Just I'll be over here kicking it. No, I had to write for SOMMORE. That's when BET came to me and just said, well, we're getting ready to fire you. It's like, well, why? Well, because all you do is write. And I said, well, what else do you need me to do? You hired me as a writer. It's like, yeah, but we need all hands on deck. This is BET. We need writers and producers. It's like, well, I can produce. And it's like, yeah, okay. And I said, no, I mean, and I almost said it's Comic View. We're not talking about a David Lean movie. This isn't Lawrence of Arabia or nothing. I mean, come on, it's Comic View. I mean, so they had the guy, his name was Bob Higgins. He showed me how to do it, and he said, I'm going to go to lunch, leave you with an editor, put together a show, and then I'll take a look at it when you get back. None of them knew that I had done a public access show called Dare You to Laugh, and this was back in 1988 when I first started comedy. 6 weeks as a comic, I'm doing public access TV. And then I produced my own show back in 1990 called Comedy on the Edge. It was Jamie Foxx's first TV appearance. It was D.L. Hughley's first TV appearance. Reynaldo Ray was on that show. The lady Yvette Wilson was on it. I had Pootie Tang on the show. I did 10 episodes. And I produced it, not knowing anything about how to produce a show except what I had seen already done. I produced it. I got the space. I got the camera crew. My director was also an editor. We would shoot. I'd go over his place. We edited it. I did the credits. I knew exactly what I wanted. I told him which shots to keep in and keep out. I went and had to rent chairs, rent the space, and get an audience in. So mine was more hands-on producing. BET was a walk in the park because they already had a formula there. I didn't have to do anything but look at the footage and decide where I wanted stuff to go. And because I had comic timing, I knew how to get out of a joke before you keep that extra second in there that blows the joke. And so when he came back, he looked at it and he laughed and he said, I don't have to teach you anything. Yeah, okay, you're a producer now. And he said, man, this is going to make my life so much easier. And it did, because they gave me, because he was producing Comic View and the best of Comic View. His name was Bob Higgins, really nice guy. But they ended up giving me the best of Comic View. So I was able to do like hundreds of shows, pretty much unsupervised, and I was able to learn on the job. And it's like, wow, if I did this, and I was able to experiment with stuff. So production came pretty easy for me.
After that, you started getting more work as a writer for other comics.
Right.
You started doing shows, late night shows. Did you start writing for late night shows?
There was a late night show that Teddy Carpenter had done, and I can't remember the name of it. Right now, Tribune had picked it up. He did 2 pilots, And Paul Mooney was the head writer, and Buddy Lewis was another writer. And we had a couple of white guys. I can't remember their name, unfortunately. But it was a good writing crew. But what happened was Tribune greenlit the show, and then Tribune changed over their front office or their head office. And Teddy was this was after Arsenio, but before the Magic Hour, before Keenan, before Vibe. So it was right in that slot where the public was really dying for another black late night talk show host. And we had written some good stuff for him and all that, and Teddy was a great host. He really was. But he also had a great ego. He acted as though he had already got the show. Because even though it was greenlit, we hadn't
shot it.
Right. We hadn't gone into production. You know, it was all talk. And so we hadn't shot anything, but he was going around like, oh, Big Bang Hank, and I've been, I'm Johnny Carson, and, I've been here for ages. And it's like, but you haven't. We haven't done anything. And so the new regime coming in, we're not as enamored with this new egotistical personality they would have to deal with. And I think they gave him an ultimatum. He said, screw you. And so they said, we're not going to do the show. How about that? How about that? We're just not going to do it. And you had to hear this from the grapevine because I forgot who it was. I think me and Buddy were in communication, and Buddy said, man, I heard we ain't going to do it. Teddy acted up. It's like, what do you mean Teddy acted up? Yeah, they don't want to do it with Teddy. And that was that.
Wow.
And that happens in TV a lot. I've had that happen a lot.
And when did you decide you wanted to write books?
I had gone overseas, and I came back, and I had done a lot of stuff over in Asia and Europe, and I came back and found out.
Were you doing military bases?
Military bases.
Okay.
Yeah. And I found out that a lot of comics didn't know anything about the history of comedy. Because at the time, a lot of athletes were talking about how basketball players weren't what they used to be because they didn't know the fundamentals. Everybody was just flying through the air and they weren't really doing, what they used to. And it's like, and I'm thinking, well, it's the same kind of thing with comedy. And then I started talking to some comedians, and there's a comic that you both know, you and I know, very prominent. And I asked him about Burt Williams, and he said he never heard of Burt Williams. And I said, oh, okay. And that kind of like lingered. And I wrote a book about the black comedy boom. That was the original thing I was writing about. They didn't know, the literary people I took it to, they didn't know who Jamie Foxx was at the time, prominently. They didn't care about Cedric or Ari Spears or any of the
comics
fledgling stars
from that period.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't give a doggone about them. And so my manager / lawyer, they knew about their peers. And some people like comedy started with Martin Lawrence or Eddie Murphy at the earliest. So, and I ran across senior comics who did not know about a lot of comedians that went before them. So the agent June Clark out of New York, she said, well, if you're willing to write a book on the history, because it's obvious you know the history of comedy and you know the personality, if you're willing to write a book on the history of black comedy, I can get you a book deal. Okay, sure. So I wrote up, she had me write up a treatment, and she took it, she shopped it. 3 publishers wanted to do it. One just wanted me to write about the 70s, just, the whole 70s sitcom and all that. One wanted me to do like the Harlem Renaissance, but the one said, do the full history. And so I asked her, it's like, well, this is my first real book. What laws or what rules do I have to go? She said, this book has never been written before. You can do whatever you want. Freak it out, have fun with it, do whatever. And I was like, okay, you got the right guy for that, because I don't know what I'm doing. So you're giving me a whole paintbrush kit, and you're giving me a canvas, but you're not saying paint in this line, paint in that line. No, said do whatever you want. Go with the laws of a book. Pick up a book and just see where this goes and that goes and that goes. But as far as the content, that's all on you. I remember my lawyer wanted to get involved because he felt he could help me out because he's a cool dude. And he said, I can help you with the writing. And it's like, I said, okay, well, what do you know about the history of black comedy? He said, well, I know a few things. I said, well, who is Clero? And they said, I don't know. It's like, okay, you can't help me. That was like litmus test. Clero was Flip Wilson's real name. And I don't expect most people to know that. But if you're a comedy historian,
you should know that.
She got me the deal with Hal Leonard and Applause.
So this is the book, Black Comedians on Black Comedy, a most amazing book on the history of African American comedy.
Chris Rock had something to do with that name, and he doesn't know it unless he watches this. He'll never know. The name of the book was called Ham Bones to Hummers, and I interviewed 125 comedians. I would go to some people's houses and restaurant. Me and Arsenio went out and ate. I was going around the Laugh Factory and the Improv a lot because comics hung around there, and I had interviewed Tony Rock. And so Chris Rock came pulling up in a car, and it's a convertible, I think. And I asked him, could I interview him for this book I was doing on the history of black comedy? And he said, well, man, I just came to see my brother and show him the new car. I mean, it's like, well, it's only going to take a minute, man. I just need to ask you a couple of questions. What's the name of the book? And I said, Ham Bones to Hummers. And he said, man, I don't want to be involved in no book named Ham Bones to Hummers. and then he went in the club. And that was it. He would not let me interview him if the book was named Ham Bones to Hummers. I remember I cornered him like a couple of days later, and he said, man, you ain't gonna leave me alone. Is this what my life has come to? I just want to come out and have a good time. Answer a couple of questions then. So he answered a couple of questions, and I explained to him, it's like, dude, Dick Gregory did the introduction of this book. I've interviewed Arsenio, I've interviewed Eddie Murphy. If you're not in here, Chris, it'll be like, what, I hate Chris Rock, I don't like Chris Rock. You're a vital person in comedy right now, in black comedy, and so I need to talk to you. And he said, man, if all them other people have done it, I did. So he went ahead and he let me get him on for a couple of questions. But he did not like Ham Bones to Hummers. And then the sales department of the publisher said, well, it's a funny title, but nobody's ever going to find your book. Because when they look for black comedy, they are not going to type in ham bones. And they said you should, with any book you do, and this is a free for anybody that's doing a book, put what the book is about. The book's about black comedians. I said, well, the book's about black comedy, it's about black comedians. They said, why don't you make that the title then? That's why it's called Black Comedians on Black Comedy. That way, if you type in black comedians, you get that book. Type in black comedy, you get that book. How to Be Funny is named How to Be Funny because I want people to, I wonder how can I be funny that by this book. So I learned that lesson.
This was your first book.
That was the first one.
This book became a documentary. What was the process for you once you did the book?
I had a manager at the time, and he had made the deal with Code Black Entertainment. They wanted to do the book as a documentary. And then me and the manager broke up. I didn't know who the deal was with. He had told me, yeah, I got a deal for you. And then we parted ways. It was like, your ex-lover, you want to tell him, where'd you stash the money? And I can tell you anything. So I couldn't ask the guy, well, who's the deal with? He didn't worry about the deal no more. Fortunately for me, Code Black was tenacious enough that when I got a new manager, they tracked him down, offered him less money, and made the deal.
You got a deal with Code Black to make a documentary. Then the process began. Yeah. Were you included in the process, or were you just...
Yeah, initially everybody was included in the process. We met with Code Black, and Code Black had let me know that they had secured Robert as the director if I went with them. And there was another offer on the table, was with the WOLPER Corporation. He used to make all those movie of the week for ABC.
David WOLPER.
David WOLPER, and his son had taken over. Robert was the deciding factor, to be quite honest, because I was going to go with WOLPER, but then they said, well, we got Robert Townsend. It's like, okay, I'll go with Robert. Code Black and Robert and I, we all sat down and figured out how they wanted to do it and who was going to contact the talent and who was going to write it and this, that, and the other. And at the time, I was touring with Cat Williams. At the time, Robert was shooting a movie. This is interesting. Robert had gone over everything, and he had turned his notes over to an editor who I think was contracted by Code Black, so I'm not going to blame Code Black for this. And the editor called me up, and Robert was off shooting a movie, and I was layover from the tour, and the editor said, hey, can we meet for lunch? I want to talk to you about the project. Okay, sure, why not? So he said, Robert gave me these notes, and man, I've always been a big fan of Robert Townsend. I just wanted to show him what I could do. And so I went and did, all this extra stuff and all that, and he don't like it. And no, what happened was Robert ripped him a new one because he told him specifically what to do. And then the guy went off rogue and did his own thing, and that it was not according to the notes that he had. And so he's calling me now to try to smooth it over to Robert. It's like, but I know you and Robert are cool. It's like, yeah, but if he told you what to do, we're not that cool. That's between you and him at this point. I mean, I appreciate the lunch. As I said, No, I can't help you, man. I mean, that's between you and Robert, but, thanks for the grub. And I just had an editor do that to me. Sometimes editors go rogue, and they were trying to impress you, but the thing is, just do the job. That's what
Right,
really
they don't know
impressed
who's
me.
in charge, so they're thinking they could play one side against the other.
Yeah.
What I will say about this book and the documentary, having been part of the documentary myself from the beginning to the end,
Right.
Being the last woman standing on it,
Yes, you are.
when everybody else got fired, was for me, the process was probably the most amazing and exciting time I've ever had working on a project, because once all the interviews were shot and we secured, got whoever we were going to get and did all of that, and then the staff was down to me. I mean, they fired everybody, and I was the only one. About 9-10 months, I was researching all the footage.
Wow.
That was all my work.
Okay.
I went.
And I did not know that.
Oh yeah, I would go to the Paley.
The Paley Center.
Yes.
Over there. Okay.
So I would go there maybe 2-3 times a week and just go through comb all the old footage, from Johnny Carson to Mike Douglas to
that was serious
everybody.
Yeah.
And then there was another place here in the valley that had all these old bootleg movies of all these black comics of the time. And I would comb through all of that. And it was like going to comedy college.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was so exciting. I have to tell you, I was enjoy every day. I was like, oh my God. And I get to look at this, and I get paid for it too.
Right.
And
all
then,
the people you discovered.
Yeah, and then trying to figure out, then it was like, okay, now out of all this gold,
what do we use?
What can we pay for? Because it wasn't what can we use.
Yeah.
What can we pay for? And during the researching of the documentary was when I discovered the Fair Use Act, because we were trying to get Amos and Andy, footage from Amos and Andy, and CBS would not give it to us because they had put it away since the 50s and nobody was going to have access to it. And I had gotten a bootleg. Actually, I had a few of them. It was like, we need this piece. We got to have this piece. So then I found out about fair use, and as long as it was under a minute and it was for educational purposes, you could do it. So so I was so excited. I was like, okay, so here's what I learned.
Wow.
It was
because if it's less than a minute, you can
use it. If it's for educational purposes, and this was definitely for educational purposes,
not for pure profit.
Right, but it's like, here's the history. We need this. This is a piece that can't, and you had to, and in fair use. Not that I'm a lawyer or anything, but what I did learn was you have to make a case why it fits educationally. So I was able to say, well, this is why, because this and this and this and this.
I thought those were cold black employees that had done that all
No,
this
man,
time.
That was me. I did all of that. And there was a wonderful woman from the post house, Dana. It was me and her. I would bring her the stuff, and then she would see what we could use, and she was phenomenal.
That is so impressive.
But everybody, I would say probably within a month of having had a staff, we were reduced to me. After we shot everything, like, people started getting fired early, right?
Yeah, people did.
As soon as the interviews were shot, everything was completely shot and there was nobody else to interview, everybody was let go.
I do remember that. I do remember everybody was let go.
We were told to get out the office.
And I remember Quincy kind of took over the reins to a degree of being a co-director.
Yes. It was a tremendous learning experience because you see how intellectual property, how creative decisions get commandeered. And at the end of the day, it's about who's paying the bill.
Exactly. Because there were like 3 versions of that movie. One was god-awful. And I know you didn't have anything to do with that. And one Robert did, which I know you probably did have because there was a lot of research that had been done in it. Do you remember the Robert version?
Oh, of course.
Okay. that was Academy Award winning stuff. It was
Right,
beautiful.
but
It was
it-
masterful.
Right, but it was not about art. It was about ego. You know, it was about, I want to do this. They wanted to bring in the academia to discuss the history. And
Yeah,
I
right.
want
They
to
wanted to
say,
make it a little highbrow.
so we had these talking heads. We had people that really didn't know comedy talking about comedy, and so it became a different thing. But the wonderful
final
thing,
version was okay.
Yeah, the
final version came out fine.
at the end of it, it's still a piece that I'm proud of.
Me too.
You know,
Me too.
it's still a piece that.
But you know, I guess it's like anything else. The reason I even bring up Robert's version was I didn't feel there was any interference on that at all. I think that was just him purely.
Yeah, that was
going
his
in.
stuff. That was his
Yeah,
stuff.
Robert and I had discussed like halfway through the project that we wanted to get an Oscar for this because it was in the document. It would be in the documentary category. We knew in most documentary categories, not all films are American. However, the voters in the Academy are mostly American. So we knew there was a lot of swing. We knew it was a black comedy, which people weren't familiar with in that degree, but it was still a popular genre that we could mess around with. And we had pitched, we had some ideas, and Robert had pitched one to one of the execs, and the exec didn't like it. And then it became a thing of ego and hubris and all that. Like I said, it depends on who's writing
Yeah,
the
it's
check.
about the money.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a really important lesson for me to learn, just in general, because whoever has the money has the power, and it doesn't matter who the talent is. If the person controlling the purse strings says, "I want blue," you're gonna have blue.
It's gonna be blue.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
I am grateful that you wrote this book. Let me tell you,
Me too.
not only because it is so incredibly informative, and it really takes us through the history of black comedy, but it's through the eyes of black comedians.
Right.
Which is unheard of, which is wonderful. And then to have the documentary as an accompaniment
Yeah.
for it, which, you know, we were very fortunate. We got
Very fortunate.
wonderful people to talk and
Yeah, I
And-
mean, we had, Maxine Waters and Michael Eric Dyson and Cornell West.
my favorite.
And we
Because
had
he was
Diane
exercising parhesia.
Yeah, right. we had Diane Watson, we had Queasy and Fumi. We had a lot of major.
Yes.
So it wasn't like we went to Washington, because it was at the Congressional
Yes,
Black
I
Caucus.
remember.
And it was the year that Barack was, and we almost got Barack on camera. We almost got him, but everybody was swarming, and you know, because I would have loved him to say, "I love black comedy," because that would have been the tag on the documentary. But the bottom line is, it came out well. But the lesson I saw when Robert did his version is, when you're untouched, you can actually do it any way you want. And the reason I only was going to write that one book, I've written 7 others. And what made me keep doing it was, unlike stand-up that I can shoot on TV and you can cut a joke out if you don't like it, unlike radio where you can pull me out or put me in or whatever, unlike any collaborative art, when you write a book, it's you. I was lucky with my first publisher, but then I wrote other books, and I was fortunate because with the other books, I self-published.
This is a book that should be at colleges and universities.
It was taught at USC.
Because I think this book should be in every college and university, especially if they have black departments.
Right.
That they should pick up this book and teach it to your students so that they not only know the political side of black history, but the artistic, comedic side of black history, because it is necessary, it is important, and we need it. I do have 2 other books. This is my collection, okay? So Darryl's got a book called How to Be Funny. And if you want to be a comedian or comedic writer, you should know this book. This is something you should pick up and get. I recommend it. And my favorite, Comedians Laugh, Be a Lady. I'm not saying this because I'm in it, although I am.
Even though you're
I am saying this because, it is a wonderful informational book about female comedians. Something for you to get. And there's another one coming out. Guess who's going to be in the book? Hot and Spicy Mamitas.
that's right.
It's fantastic. And now, so this is 4 books. And
Right.
you have...
I've written 7 have been published.
Okay.
And that one, the last one you held up, This Day in Comedy, will come out December 3rd, and that's the Ethnic Encyclopedia Laughter. So that covers African American, Latin, Asian, Native American, and Middle Eastern. It's the first comedy encyclopedia.
Wow.
I did not know that. When I went in and I just said, well, we'll call it an encyclopedia. And then I looked it up, and there's never been a comedy encyclopedia.
Wow. And
Yeah.
what are the other 4 books that you have
The other
out
4
there?
books, one is, the second book I did was a book called Pip Down, The Rise and Fall of Cat Williams. And I was advised not to do that book, even though if you read the book, it's not a slam of Cat Williams. I want to write a book about fame, because I write about themes. I don't really try to write specific personality stuff. I wanted to write about fame, but that's such a broad, you can throw that out there all day and nobody's going to go run out and buy it.
So you wrote a book on Cat Williams.
Right. A lot of people thought I was going to try to slam Cat and all that. I had known Cat when I wrote the book, I had known him for 10 years, if not more.
And you have been writing with him.
Yeah, we met in Oakland, and when he came down here, he used to host the Hollywood Park Casino. When he'd go on vacation or the road, he had me fill in for him. So we were cool. We were friends in the sense of that. The book I wanted to write was about fame, and I really didn't want to write about a specific individual, but since I'd worked with Cat, and you're talking about a guy who was living in the back of a U-Haul truck, no teeth, no prospects and all that, to rise to be a comic. When I was working for him, he was making $125,000 per show. So that is a huge, gigantic leap in your life. And if you're talking about fame, then you would have to chronicle somebody like that, because that firsthand knowledge of what he did and all the pitfalls and all that. So I wanted to talk about how rapid fame, what to be aware of. Also, a lot of people think they want to be famous, but the reality of fame is totally different than what you imagine it to be, because number one, you can't shut it off. You can't wake up one day and be famous and people digging through your trash and asking a bunch of personal questions, and tomorrow I want to be unfamous, and they leave you alone like it was back in the days where you could ride the bus or go shopping for yourself without anybody bugging you.
And also the enormous responsibility that comes with fame. There is a tremendous amount of responsibility.
Every time you open your mouth,
yes,
you are probably quoted. And if you're misquoted, you should be able to try to clean that up, because the truth is like right there at the surface. But a lot of people don't know how to handle it, and that's why a lot of people become drug addicts or alcoholics, or fame can accentuate whatever is bad about you.
Yes.
Or it can bring out the good in you, because now, if you're a humanitarian type of personality, that fame can be used for good. But if you honestly believe your own hype, then it's probably going to be used destructively, because you're going to be trying to talk down to people and all that. That was not Cat's problem with me. What I saw was how people just kind of pulled out the chapstick and just started kissing just a lot of butt. And acting like they had known the guy for ages and all this. And then how quick that the people who hoist you up are so quick to want to, pull the legs out from under you and rip you down. So I talked about the Beatles, I talked about Freddie Prinze, I talked about a lot of people who were famous beyond Cat, but I knew if you come up with a title of a popular person at the time, people would run out, and they did. They ran out and they bought that book like really quick and wholesale before somebody bootlegged it, which is bound to happen with a book, with a pimp in the title. I did another book, which is one of my favorite books. I wanted to do something about the American Revolution, and I had always heard that some of the presidents actually had black blood in them. And I knew Warren Harding did, I heard Lincoln did, I heard Jefferson did. You hear all these rumors. I wanted to do something that was funny, though, with the American Revolution. So I have Forefathers, and Forefathers is about Thomas Jefferson really being a black guy, and they hired a white guy to play the white Thomas Jefferson that we see. The real Thomas Jefferson, who did the legislature and the Declaration of Independence and all that, no, he was black, and that's why you have the artist painting the white version. Yeah, this is my comic book. This is my graphic novel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then you put a CD series.
Yeah,
called Black and Blue.
I was approached by the people who bought Laugh Records, and they knew that I had produced stuff. And they said, would you produce this CD collection of party records? And
so tell us what party records are.
Party records are joke records that if you grew up or listened to Red Fox just telling jokes, or Mantan Moreland, or Rudy Ray Moore, more than likely Dolomite. If you grew up listening to Dolomite, or Slappy White, or LaWanda Page, Leroy and Skillet, Marsha Warfield is on this one. And maybe might not be familiar with Marsha Warfield, did Party records.
And Party records were also a little
dirty, risque.
Yes, risque, yes.
If you, back in the day, when you went and bought actual physical albums, you would go to the record store and you would order like a Party record. You would say, yeah, give me Rudy Ray Moore, Below the Belt. And they would order it for you, which is an actual title. And they would order it for you, and then you would go back to the record store, and they would have it in a brown paper bag,
right.
And they would reach under the counter,
right.
And it's like, so you Jones? It's like, I'm Jones. Like, okay, we got your record. And then they would give you your record.
Or they would have it in the back.
Right.
Yes.
They'd have to go back and get it, and then come and then give it to you in the bag. And once you got out of the store, you could take it out of the bag. But as long as you're in the store, no, you got to leave it in the bag, because they did not have the stickers that we have now. The
advisories.
Right, the advisory sticker, right, disclaimer.
Yes.
That this is nasty.
Yes, and it was illegal, I believe. You know, that's why Lenny Bruce kept getting arrested.
Right.
Because his profanity was, at that time, not acceptable.
The way adults talk, but
that's
not
right.
in
On
a public,
stage. That's right.
in a public setting.
That's right.
So I loved doing Black and Blue. Black and Blue is available on Amazon. I love doing it because they gave me like 20 hours of footage I had to go through. So it was like what you were talking about. I was so excited every day to get up. And it was the summer of 15 or 14 that I did this, and I couldn't get enough of it, because then you listen to all of it, and then it's like, so how am I going to cut this down? And because it was all funny to me, but then I would go for the stuff that, timing-wise, in the sense of, some of it was really funny in the 70s, like, okay, you can get rid of all the Nixon jokes and get rid of, jokes about politicians from the 70s, and then you just try to get down to, like, the really hilarious stuff. It's a 5 CD set, I think.
Wow.
And then I wrote liner notes. They told me, if you want to, you can write some liner notes. I wrote 45 pages. It's a little mini book. Robert Townsend did the forward for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember when he
Oh,
was
you remember
doing
when
it.
he was doing it?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I was glad to have him do that, because I knew he knew about all those people.
Mm-hmm. You have touched a lot of different things with your comedy. Mm-hmm. You have been able not only to do stand-up, but to write for people, to then write for shows, write books. Where do you want to go to with your career now? What haven't you done that you would like to do?
I want to be a preservationist. There's some books that I want to write, and I'm not going to bring those out right now, because some are actually serious books. I don't want to just stay totally in comedy. Like all comics, every comic wants to do drama. Every musician wants to do comedy or drama, and so everybody gears towards drama. What I do want to do is I want to be known not as a historian, but as a preservationist. To me, the difference is a historian chronicles. A preservationist tries to make sure that I wrote a book, and I don't have I didn't even do a print up of it. It's called How to Do Stand-Up Comedy, Preserving a Dying Art Form. People talk about internet comics right now. I do want to touch on that real quick. Internet comics are nothing to fear. No more than the black comedy boom comedians were anything to fear. No more than the socially commentary comics of Thea Vidal or A.J. Jamal or Mario Joyner before the black comedy boom were anything to fear. No more than the joke tellers in Black and Blue. Everybody moved everyone out the way. And so I'm hearing comedians that came from the black comedy boom, my era, saying, man, these internet comics are taking over. I said, you mean the same way we took over? You mean the same way Mario Joyner and Thea Vidal took over from the joke tellers? You mean the way they took over from the minstrels? You mean everybody comes along and takes over. It's not supposed to. Here's the deal. Comedy is the only art form with no school. It's still Wild Wild West. There's no rule or anything. Just like music, I was playing funk. All of a sudden, here came disco. I was obsolete. All of a sudden, here came hip-hop. Disco's obsolete. So every art form is supposed to keep moving. If not, there's a real problem. And I know a lot of comics, for fear of internet comedians, are running out and getting day jobs. Well, that's not really the answer. because art, you can't have an art form that survives if the people in the art form have day jobs. I mean, quite honestly, I had a day job when I got into comedy, and since I've been into comedy, I've tried to keep it strictly comedy. I've really tried to like concentrate on that.
So how do you recommend for comics who've been at it a long time to evolve so that they don't get left behind and don't end up with a day job, but are able to keep their material fresh,
That's what you just said is the key word. You have to keep your material fresh. A lot of comedians have their act, and they just keep doing their act, or derivatives of their act. You have to grow. There were two great comedians. We had Richard Pryor and you had George Carlin. And it was never a question of who was number one, who was number two. It was always Pryor was one, Carlin was two. In recent years, others, including myself, look at Carlin as one and Pryor as two. The reason for that is Pryor was kind of like the Beatles. He did a hot 10 years that were blazing hot. And then the rest of it was just kind of like former shell of what he was. Carlin stayed current from the time he was the hippy-dippy weatherman up until the 7 words he couldn't say on TV, up until he was an old man. He was still relevant with what he was talking about. That's where I kind of want to go with this when I say I want to be a preservationist. And I just really want to stay current. The next thing that I want to do, I want to stay in book writing. And I want to do a book on the full history of comedy. And I'm talking about all the way from the caveman or when it first started all the way up to like yesterday without naming any names. Just the history and the evolution of that living organism called comedy. And yeah, we'll talk about vaudeville and we'll talk about the black comedy boom, we'll talk about minstrels, but I don't want to get into personalities because I've already done that with 3 books.
Yes.
I mean, I've broken everybody down. If you want to know something else about them, go talk to their family. Because if it ain't in these books, who cares?
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
This was a incredibly informative talk with you. I think anybody who wants to get into comedy, you have gotten so much valuable information. Look below for all the links on Darryl, on his books, on his webinar, and also on him personally. If you have any comments, please let us know right below. Give us some feedback. We love to get it. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get current information as it comes up. Thank you.